Educrats push Biden to pull school accreditation from charter and private schools who don't teach science. The same geniuses are already using public schools to teach trans hoaxes. So I guess Biden should go ahead and cancel the public schools, right? At least we can hope. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today we start with Joe Biden and a push by the Human Rights Campaign to pull accreditation for any Christian school that does not teach a radical leftist interpretation of science. And so I go back to what I said in the tease here as well. So the same idiots who are teaching 3- and 4-year-olds that gender is all made up, that sex and gender don't mean anything, that at 5 and 6, you can determine what you are, even though you've developed no critical thinking skills. You have not yet reached the age where you can think abstractly. Those are the guys pushing science, right? They're okay with that kind of a lie, that kind of anti-science BS. But heaven forbid you suggest that there was a creator behind the creation of the universe. There was intelligent design behind the making of the universe. That's going to get you a discredit. So again, you can teach little children that gender and sex mean nothing, but you darn well better teach that the Big Bang was the reason that everything that exists today, or we're going to try to get you out of the education business.
Thank you, Bill Nye. I appreciate that.
He is the engineering guy because he's not a scientist, right?
Don't ruin my childhood. All right, the Human Rights Campaign actually posited this removal of accreditation for all these Christian schools in their blueprint for positive change 2020. It's always positive and bright and great and awesome and go Human Rights Campaign.
And
because that's
positive
what you're here
change
for.
means
positive.
Doing away with your religious rights.
2020. It's a whole slew because if lefties know how to do anything, it's to slew. So that's a whole slew of policy changes, initiatives for the federal departments and what they should be doing in the Biden administration.
According to liberals. And that is starting with the undermining of the First Amendment.
Yes, basically. According to the Department of Ed, the Human Rights Campaign suggests that the Biden administration, they suggest, but then they say they must.
Yes.
So they suggest they must ensure non-discrimination policies and science-based curricula are not undermined by religious exemptions to accreditation standards. You see how long of a subhead title that even is? It's gobbledygook in the truest form.
It's worse than gobbledygook. It's self-contradictory. And we're going to ask you to ensure non-discrimination, which you would think would include, people who have religious worldviews, right? No. So non-discrimination means don't discriminate against our preferred left-wing victims. Religious people with religious backgrounds don't count. And then in the very next phrase, policies and science-based curricula, right? So on the one hand, we will not discriminate against people unless they happen to be of religious backgrounds. And the second instance, right, science cannot be challenged from the perspective of religion, which means basically that the First Amendment's going to have to go, already targeting the Second Amendment. And so what do you want here? Hey, at least they're telling us the honest to God's truth, what they want to do.
When they finally get to the Third Amendment, I'm really looking forward to the no quartering. Woohoo! Let's do it. Anyway, as the document reads, language regarding accreditation of religious institutions of higher education in the Higher Education Opportunity Act could be interpreted to require accrediting bodies to accredit religious institutions that discriminate or that do not meet science-based curricula standards. Anyone understand what they just said? Nope.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do. Let's make sure that gay people cannot be criticized or in any way treated differently when it comes to private Christian schools. Let me repeat that. If you're a private Christian school and you hold a belief about sexuality that is biblical-based, you are a bigot. We will never let that happen again. And number two, you as a private Christian school will no longer be able to teach Genesis because that's not quote-unquote science.
They'll talk about genocide in various senses, but not Genesis. All right. And not the band either. All right, now the Department of Education also should issue a regulation clarifying that this provision, which requires accreditation agencies to respect the stated mission of religious institutions, does not require the accreditation of religious institutions that do not meet neutral accreditation standards, including non-discrimination policies and scientific curriculum requirements. Interpretation?
Don't you love the fact that they call anti-religious bigotry or they call it neutral? In their mind, when you discriminate against religious perspectives, that's neutral. When you force gay rights on Christian schools, you're just being neutral. Everybody agrees about this. Right? That's the non-discrimination they're talking about. And then, meanwhile, so you're gonna take our views of sexuality and call them neutral, and you're gonna take away the accreditation of any Christian school. I notice. Do they include Muslim schools in this?
Not specifically.
They don't specifically mention this. This is one of those.
Oh, I do. Nope.
One of those situations where, let's just say, the enthusiasm of Islam for its own worldview could actually benefit common sense in the Constitution.
Yeah,
so, am I suggesting something? Am I suggesting something? I'm going to talk as vaguely as they are.
Exactly.
Let's just say the enthusiasm of our Muslim friends when it comes to not letting people tell them what they're allowed to believe, the enthusiasm of those folks could be used at the moment, wouldn't you think?
Neutral.
All
right.
Just being neutral
Just
here.
being neutral. Southern Baptist Theological Seminary President Albert Mohler wrote a column responding to all this. And he said, this is an undisguised attempt to shut down any semblance of a Christian college or university that would possess the audacity to operate from a Christian worldview. Fact check true. He says, in terms of accreditation, this is an atomic bomb. In clear text for all the world to see, the Human Rights Campaign summons the Biden administration to deny accreditation, or at the very least to facilitate the denial of accreditation to Christian institutions, Christian colleges and universities, and for that matter, any other religious institution or school that does not meet the demands of the LGBTQ orthodoxy, also known as the Muslim.
I still think my explanation was much crisper and less wordy. Nevertheless, he's exactly right about that. And this is what they're going to try. It's going to be relentless now. I mean, you're going to have to come to the realization, and you should have already come to it already. I mean, the fact that we're doing the Dr. Duke show and we still got people out there who are excited about the return of public schools so they can get their kids out of the house and back to being educated, you better realize it's over. It has occurred. The classrooms of American kids from kindergarten all the way through graduate study have been transformed into places of sociological engineering. The job of education is to make you compliant, to make you controllable, to make you willing to surrender your liberties and freedoms. And how many of those have we seen people willing to give up in this ridiculously opaque period of the pandemic? How many people are out there who are ratting on other people for having Thanksgiving parties? This is what they want. They want to use education, and they're doing it very successfully, to turn kids into completely controlled, completely compliant wards of the state.
Even though Dr. Duke says it's completely no hope anymore, because that's what he does, he's a contrarian, we do have a little hope, at least in Kentucky, where a federal judge has ruled that the governor of Kentucky can't actually shut down Christian schools. Whoopsie.
May I intervene for just a moment?
Is it going to be contrarian?
Katie says that I have no hope. That's not true. I have no hope in the public schools. And her proof that there is hope is Christian schools. See how that works? A Kentucky judge said public schools cannot shut down, the public government cannot shut down Christian schools. That's hope. There's no hope in the public schools, is my point.
Well, here we go. From the First Liberty Institute, they actually had represented Danville Christian Academy in Danville, Kentucky, who was ordered to close their school after Thanksgiving, but a preliminary injunction prevented Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear from enforcing his order prohibiting private religious schools from holding in-person classes after Thanksgiving. This is because U.S. District Judge Gregory F. Van Tuttenhove had a 21-page explanation, opinion, and order stating that part of the genius of the American tradition is that right from the start, we were clear about what mattered. We even made a list, the Bill of Rights. Think of it as a catalog of values so dear that they deserved protection from future edicts or even majorities at a moment in time. Infringing these values is rare. They matter that much. And then he went on in the rest of the 21 pages. Yeah.
That
It was,
dude's
it was a nice
wordsmith.
intro. He said how they can't keep those schools closed.
Yep. You don't have, I just love what he said. We have some rights that are so inalienable, so important. I love that he called it a list, right? One of the things the Founding Fathers did is made a list. It's called the Bill of Rights, in order of those things that are way bigger than majorities, that are way bigger than public sentiment, way bigger even than pandemics. Right?
What?
And he says that's where the hope is. The hope is your ability as an American to educate your kids outside the walls, the oppressive walls of public schools. You can do that now. And cases like this, and this is the thing, Kentucky is a pretty deep red state. And yet they go ahead and elect a Democrat governor, and what's he doing? He's already trying to impinge all of those constitutional values. You need to get rid of that governor. Kentucky.
Andy Beshear.
You see what he's doing. He's already using his power. He is a governor in the state where almost all of you see things the same way. Stop letting him try these little gambits. And thank God for. Do we know who appointed that judge to the seat?
I did not look that up.
That's all right.
That information, but
But I love that. I'm gonna borrow that when I teach the Constitution. That they made a list. Literally, the Founding Fathers made a list of those things that were the most important rights and responsibilities that were way bigger than legislatures and presidents and Supreme Courts. And we should be very thankful at this time of the year that they're there. And the fact that he ordered open against the governor these Christian schools, allowed parents to send their kids to Christian schools, it's good. It's what you need.
Roger Byron, who's senior counsel at First Liberty, said the court recognized that Governor Beshear's order prohibiting religious schools from holding in-person classes goes beyond his authority and violates the First Amendment. I'm going to say it again a little bit slower. Governor Beshear's order prohibiting religious schools from holding in-person classes goes beyond his authority and violates the First Amendment. And we're grateful to the court for the rule of law.
And I would just like to suggest, because no one seems interested in doing it, but because it's expensive and it's going to take a long time, but you should be taking the public schools to court more often. We should as a country. Taking what they're doing, there's a big collective, what do they call it? Class action. There's a great class action suit here. The public schools are predicated on getting our kids literate, getting our kids educated. They have eschewed that plan to instead teach sociology and anti-First Amendment, anti-constitutional values. There's a class action suit here. How many millions and millions of parents in this country have paid their property taxes, have sacrificed and scrimped, had a lot of money taken out of their paychecks every week that went to these public schools? Public schools are now not doing what they said they were going to do. In fact, they're doing the exact opposite. They're not teaching about our history and our government and our way of life and our civic responsibilities. They are undermining them. That seems to me as like the greatest class action suit in the history of America. I hope to see 5 years from now late night TV commercials, right? Like they do it for mesothelioma, certain kinds of cancers. Hey, I'm with the law firm at Shyster. If your kid has been sent to school and not been able to read, if you suffer from 8th graders who can't read, give Shyster and Shyster a call. We specialize in suing the pants off of these idiot public schools. That's what I look forward to.
I think William Shatner would say it better.
Hupy and Abraham.
He's really Hupy and Abraham.
Call now.
Anyway,
what are you waiting for?
The court's order states that if social distancing is good enough for offices, colleges, and universities within the Commonwealth, Kentucky we're talking again, it's good enough for religious private K-12 schools that benefit from constitutional protection.
Hupy and Abraham. Right now.
Well, the court may have been good in Kentucky, but down in Florida, they're having trouble with the cops, where the Tampa Bay Times is reporting that students' grades, like their academic grades, are being monitored by the cops to determine whether or not these kids, after high school, maybe still during high school, whatever, will become criminals.
Do you remember the day, Katie Petrick, the many days of long ago when we warned that all this big data was going to be used to destroy your kid's future.
Bingo.
Remember that? And we were told by the educrats that we don't share our videos. We don't share your kids' education. We just do it to keep tabs on them internally. Remember that?
Internally.
Great big lie.
Well, that's the thing. It is kind of an internal thing because they won't share this information. I'll explain. The Pasco Sheriff's Office has their own naughty or nice list. Since it's that time of the year, I put a little holiday spirit in. So they have a naughty and a nice list.
How, did you say holiday instead of Christmas? What kind of cheer did you put into it?
Holiday cheer.
And what should you have said?
Well, Hanukkah's almost starting, so I want to be inclusive. Hanukkah is starting.
Keep Christ
in Christmas.
Yes.
But I'm celebrating
and
all
to our
year.
Jewish friends, Mazel Tov, baby.
Celebrating the whole month.
Get the dreidel.
We deserve the whole month to celebrate. So happy December to everyone. We have
That was my
a
dreidel
naughty or nice list. We know which list he's on. The list of students who basically think they could fall into a life of crime. So here's life of crime potential, yes or no. And it's based on these are the factors. Whether or not they've been abused. Whether or not they've gotten a D or an F in school. And this is according to, it's like written down in the agency's actual internal intelligence manual. So it's not like one guy is just keeping his own secret little list. No, in their internal intelligence manual, this is how they determine whether or not teenagers are going to be criminals. So were you abused or did you get a D or an F?
They're actually taking your kid's sensitive medical and personal involvement with courts, things like abuse. They're taking your kid's personal information from your family, and they are using it to profile your children. Now, look, this is bad no matter who's doing it, but the fact that the police officers do it, given the level of hatred for police in the educational community, this might be the one thing that is required to get the schools to stop doing it.
But it gets better with the involvement of everyone, whatever. So the sheriff's office has assembled a list by combining the rosters for most of the middle and high schools in the county. All right, so they gather all the lists, and the records are so sensitive, they say, that they're actually protected by state and federal law. Think about that one for a minute. And then school district data shows which of them are struggling academically, have they missed classes, are they sent to the office for discipline, and the records from the State Department of Children and Families flag the kids who have witnessed household violence or experienced it themselves. So this is all the data they're all collecting. And the manual states any one of these factors makes your kid more likely to be a criminal. And as of right now, they have 420 kids on this list.
And when they say that your kids have witnessed home violence, all that means is you've watched a documentary. All that means is that you've watched a movie.
They watched the Dr. Duke show.
They watched the doc. Exactly.
Sorry.
And so
just contributed.
Go back to my point before. We fought against this record keeping. We've fought against this data gathering for the last 15 years, 10 years at least. We've been fighting against this ever since we first learned what Common Core was, which is a huge magnification of the data gathering capacity of the state and the federal entity when it comes to your kids' education. So we fought this from the beginning, but we've had no allies, right? Except parents who don't want their kids. All the other major organizations think this is wonderful. But my point is, given how much the cops are hated, even by members of government, and especially by the incoming Biden administration and their surrogates, maybe this would be a good way to get this information out of the hands of anybody. Maybe because cops are using it to profile. Let's just throw this in there. Whether it means anything or not, we're going to add it. Cops are profiling black kids as criminals. If there's even one minority kid who's on that list, these are police officers who are racially profiling kids.
The sheriff's office did say they've been keeping this data for the past 20 years now. But here's what's funny to me. The Department of Children and Families would not answer any questions about this. The sheriff, Chris Nacco, declined an interview request. And this is the Tampa Bay Times. They're trying to get information. 2 school board members said they support the department, and 3 of them declined to comment. And then when Pasco School Superintendent Kurt Browning was asked, he wasn't concerned at all.
If there's ever a time you could take the tool bags on the left, Black Lives Matter and Antifa, these idiots, and you could use them to benefit those of us who have common sense views of privacy, sick 'em. Sick 'em. Dog whistle.
It's time for some real education. Gerard Manley Hopkins was an English poet and Jesuit priest whose fame established him among the leading Victorian poets. His manipulation of prosody, particularly his concept of sprung rhythm, established him as an innovative writer of verse, as did his technique of praising God through vivid use of imagery and nature. By 1930, his work was recognized as one of the most original literary accomplishments of his century.
Hopkins is one of those guys like Dostoevsky in the Russian tradition who's writing after something really important happened and reviving it. In the case of Dostoevsky, as the Russian people began to lurch towards socialism and then communism, at almost the very same time that Hopkins was doing what he was doing, Dostoevsky was writing his great novels that were calling out godless materialism. Here, after the Enlightenment, after the Romantic period in English poetry, when God was largely being displaced through a new paganism, right, where God was no longer necessarily transcendent, the Romantic poets were identifying God in trees, in nature. And so here you have Hopkins, who's come after both of those movements, and yet he is reclaiming two things in British poetry. One, he is talking about a transcendent God, and two, he is going back to the idea that God can be part of nature, but that nature can point to the bigness of God, the transcendent nature of God. Take one of my favorite poems from Hopkins. It's called God's Grandeur. How big, how grand, how uncontainable is God. And it begins like this. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. It's not containing it. It doesn't limit God's power to the world. But this world of ours that he gave us, this world is charged with the grandeur of God. It will flame out, that grandeur, like shining from shook foil. It gathers to a greatness like the ooze of oil crushed. Why do men then now not wreck his rod? Why in this time of radical industrialization? Why do men, despite the presence of God everywhere, why do they not listen to him? Why do men then now not wreck his rod, pay attention to his power? Generations have trod, and all is seared with trade, bleared, smeared with toil, and wears man's smudge, and shares man's smell, the way that man's grimy fingerprint is negatively all over the world we inhabit. The soil is bare now, nor can foot feel being shod. And for all this, nature is never spent. There lives the dearest freshness deep down things. And though the last lights of the black west went, oh, morning at the brown brink eastward springs, because the Holy Ghost over the bent world broods with warm breast and with bright wings. That there's no degradation that human beings could wreak on the world that God made would ultimately take away the grandeur of that God who made the universe.
All right, before we go, just a reminder that the best way to keep up with our various shows at Freedom Project is to follow us on Parler. So take just a few moments today and go follow at Duke Pesta, at Katie, and at Freedom Project. And if you're a fan of the show, of course you are, please consider a just one-time, tax-deductible donation to support the Patriot Club, and we're going to send you an awesome tumbler as a little thank you. All you got to do to sign up is visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us. Now, in the name of science, we're going to wrap our fun fact of the day with science. So, did you know that atoms are 99.9% empty space? So if you take all of our empty space in our atoms, we could fit all of the human race into the volume of a sugar cube.
And that wraps up this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, voulez-vous parler avec moi ce soir? Friends, go to Parler so we can parlay each other. Voulez-vous parler avec moi ce soir?